This video brings together several gentle stories from the Forest of Wispia into one calm, continuous journey, a peaceful companion for relaxing, unwinding, or listening before sleep. On a quiet morning in the Forest of Wispia, autumn leaves drifted gently down. The trees were only half dressed, and the air whispered that winter was coming. Not far from there lived a little bear, kind, curious, and playful, but not very responsible. He spent his days exploring, never thinking much about what would come next. While the forest softly murmured, "Winter is near," the bear always replied, "I'll get my den ready later. I still have time." Days passed, and the animals hurried to prepare for winter, everyone except him. He kept playing, leaving everything for later. One cold morning, a tiny snowflake landed on his nose. The bear froze, surprised. Autumn was ending faster than he expected. He looked around. The trees were already bare. The ground was turning white, and the forest held a new quiet silence. Winter had arrived. He ran to look for berries, but many were hidden under the snow. He tried to find dry leaves, but almost none were left. He wanted to fix his shelter, but the den was cold and empty. For the first time, the bear felt worried. He had left everything for too long, and now he didn't know where to begin. His forest friends saw him sad. The rabbit gathered leaves for his bed. The bird found berries that could still be picked, and together they helped warm up his den. The bear worked beside them, learning step by step what he should have done before. When they finished, the shelter was warm and ready for winter. That night, as the first snowflakes fell, the bear curled up happily, thinking about how lucky he was to have good friends, and how important it is to do things on time. And so, today's adventure comes to an end. The forest holds many more exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Each night, a new tale begins to glow in Wispia. Winter had arrived in the Forest of Wispia. Snow covered the ground, and the cold air made everything sparkle. Among the trees lived a little fox, quick, curious, and a bit mischievous. Not far away lived a young raccoon, calm, kind, and a good friend of the fox. In the middle of the forest stood an old wild pear tree. Its golden fruits were sweet, and all the animals loved them. That winter, only one golden pear remained. It shone among the bare branches, waiting to fall to the ground. The two friends wanted to enjoy that last fruit and promised to eat it together whenever it finally fell. One day, while wandering without direction, the fox spotted something bright on the snow, the last pear. It had fallen without anyone noticing. The fox looked around. No one was nearby. If I keep it, no one will know, he thought. He picked it up carefully and ran back to his den, trying to convince himself that nothing was wrong. That afternoon, as every day, the raccoon went to check on the precious pear and was surprised to see it was gone. Seeing the empty branch made him sad. He thought it must have fallen, and someone might have taken it. In his hiding place, the fox stared at the pear. It was beautiful and golden, but inside he didn't feel right. He took a deep breath and made a hard decision. He ran off to find the raccoon, the pear held gently in his teeth. When he found him, he said nervously, "I found it, and I didn't tell you. I'm sorry. I want to share it with you, just like we promised." The raccoon looked at him in surprise and said, "Telling the truth can be hard, but it almost always helps you feel better. They sat together under the pear tree and shared the golden fruit. It tasted even sweeter when enjoyed together. And so tonight's adventure comes to an end. The forest hides many other wonderful stories, waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new tale begins to shine in Wispia. Winter had arrived in the Forest of Wispia. Snow covered everything with a soft, gentle glow. In a small burrow lived a kind, good-hearted little mouse. But he had one flaw. He hoarded all the food he found. He had gathered so many acorns and seeds that he almost didn't fit inside his burrow. While the forest moved slowly in the cold, he only thought about protecting his huge pile of food. One morning, he saw a woodpecker pecking at a frozen trunk, searching for food and finding nothing. The mouse looked at his storage. He looked at the bird, and for the first time he thought, maybe I could share one. He took an acorn and left it beside the bird. The bird looked at him, surprised, and gave him a huge, grateful smile. The little mouse felt a strange, lovely joy. Helping made his heart feel light. Later, he saw a small squirrel digging in the snow, trying to find something to eat. The mouse hesitated for a moment, but then took another acorn and placed it in front of the squirrel. She opened her eyes in surprise and made tiny hops of happiness. Then he saw a beaver shivering with cold under a bush, too weak to go and look for food. The mouse shared once more. The beaver smiled shyly, and the mouse felt his chest fill up even more. He went back to his burrow. There was still plenty of food, but now he felt happier than ever. He had discovered that sharing made him feel better. He hadn't lost anything important. On the contrary, he had discovered that generosity always comes back as joy. And so today's adventure came to an end. The forest keeps many other warm stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. Morning arrived wrapped in a soft mist in the Forest of Wispia. Everything was quiet, as if the forest were waiting for something special. Between the trees, a lonely deer appeared. It walked slowly, looking around, a little disoriented. A small bluebird spotted him from a branch and flew down curiously. "Hello," it said cheerfully. "Are you okay? You look lost." The deer nodded shyly. "The fog made me lose my way. I'm not sure where I am." "That's all right," replied the bird. "If you want, I can walk with you for a while." They walked together among the trees, talking quietly. Little by little, the forest began to feel warmer and more welcoming. As they passed by a cave, a large bear stepped outside to greet them. He was decorating the entrance with green branches and winter pine cones. "Hello, friends," he said with a smile. "It's cold out there. If you'd like, you can come inside and rest for a bit." The deer accepted gratefully. Inside, the cave was warm and peaceful. The news spread quickly through the forest. A new visitor had arrived and needed a little help. Before long, a rabbit appeared carrying dry leaves and soft moss. "I thought this might help make things more comfortable," he said proudly. Later, the old turtle arrived, walking slowly. She carried some winter apples, carefully protected. "To share," she said with a gentle smile. The deer looked at them all with emotion. "I didn't expect such kindness. Helping without expecting anything in return says so much about you." As they talked, the fog began to lift. the sky filled with golden and pink colors. The animals stepped outside to enjoy the sunset. The forest shone as if it were a special day. The deer took a few steps toward the clearing. He turned back, bowed his head in gratitude, and continued on his way. When they looked again, the deer was gone. Only his soft tracks remained in the snow, and a warm feeling in the air. As night fell, a huge shooting star crossed the sky. The animals looked at one another in silence. The turtle smiled gently. Can you imagine that deer was who we're all thinking of? No one answered, but everyone smiled. That night, they stayed together in the bear's cave, talking about what they had lived and celebrating being united. And so, today's adventure came to an end. The forest hides many other exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Each night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. The snow was slowly melting in the Forest of Wispia. The river began to flow again, and spring was gently waking up. By the river bank, the beaver could not stay still. Crack! Crack! He was cutting wood and dragging heavy logs to fix his home. He had worked all winter long, and even his whiskers felt sore. That morning, he woke up in a bad mood. A little gray cloud floated above his head. A small bird saw him from a branch and thought, "I will help." The bird flew down with its beak full of dry twigs. But the sticks kept falling. Splash! They made noise and did not fit where he wanted them to. "Grrr," growled the beaver. "Too much noise. Nothing is working today." The little bird felt scared and flew away slowly. He only wanted to be a good friend. Suddenly, Rabbit appeared hopping happily. He saw the grumpy beaver and smiled. "My friend," said Rabbit, wiggling his ears. "Let's play and run by the river." The beaver sighed deeply. His head hurt. Everything felt annoying. Then, step by step, the wise old turtle arrived. She did not rush, but her eyes understood a lot. The turtle knew that, sometimes, friends do not need games or noise. She sat beside the beaver and said nothing. She simply stayed there with him. The beaver took a deep breath, and the gray cloud faded away. "I am very tired, Turtle." Talking made him feel better. And so today's adventure came to an end. The forest hides many other wonderful stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. Spring had arrived in the Forest of Wispia, filling it with soft light, new leaves, and a quiet calm that invited everyone to observe. Among the branches lived Pixel, a small chameleon from the forest. Pixel was very shy. When he felt nervous, his skin changed color to look like tree bark, making him almost invisible. When the others played hide and seek, Pixel blended in so well that no one could ever find him. The game would end, the others would leave, and Pixel stayed there camouflaged, feeling a little lonely. Sometimes he wanted to get closer and say something, but his body stayed still and the words would not come out. One day, some of the forest acorns began to disappear. Not all of them, just a few. No one understood why. The animals looked around, confused, trying to figure out what was happening. Pixel watched quietly from a high branch. When night fell, he decided to stay awake, very still, watching carefully. The nighttime breeze began to blow gently through the trees. Pixel saw how some acorns slowly rolled downhill. They rolled little by little into a corner of the forest, where they gathered without anyone noticing. It seemed as if the breeze wanted to plant them there, bringing them together exactly where new trees would be needed. At sunrise, Pixel knew he had to show the secret to the others. His heart went thump, thump very fast, but he took a deep breath. Little by little, his body turned a light and gentle color so the others could see him without fear. The animals followed him in silence. Pixel led them to the secret corner where they saw the small pile of acorns. The animals then understood how important Pixel had been to the forest. They did not push him or clap. They simply sat near him and smiled calmly. From that day on, everyone knew that Pixel was always watching, caring for the forest, even when he was hardly seen. And so ended today's adventure. The forest hides many other exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. In Wispia, the forest was full of movement. Branches swayed and birds slowly woke from the long winter. On a very low branch, almost touching the ground, a young little bird watched everything in silence. He moved his wings, but didn't dare to use them. "It's a good day to try," his mother said calmly. The little bird looked down. Beneath the branch, there was only soft grass and dry leaves. "What if I fall?" he asked. "That's okay if you do," his mother replied. "From here it's just a small jump. I'll be watching." The little bird took a deep breath. He closed his eye and let himself go. He glided for just a moment and landed gently on another branch, very close by. He opened his eyes in surprise. He had flown, just a little, but he had flown. From there, the forest looked different, a little bigger, a little more interesting. "What's beyond that?" he asked, pointing toward the trees in the distance. His mother spread her wings. "Let's go together." They flew a little farther, a little higher. The air didn't feel so scary anymore. Back on a safe branch, the little bird looked in the sky. This time, he didn't wait. He jumped again. He flew higher than before. The forest opened beneath his wings. He saw a shining lake. He saw gentle hills beyond the trees. The world was huge, and he could explore it, step by step. When he returned, his mother was waiting in silence. The little bird smiled. He hadn't gone very far, but he had gone farther than he ever thought possible. And so today's adventure came to an end. The forest hides many other exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. It was a quiet morning in the Forest of Wispia. Sunlight slipped through the leaves, and the air smelled of damp earth and flowers. Among the branches, a very curious squirrel spent her days inventing impossible things. Pine cone wheels, leaf umbrellas, raindrop clocks, but nothing worked the way she expected. Her inventions made more noise than results. Sometimes she even tripped over her own ideas. And the branches often got tangled in her tail, leaving a little mess behind her. The other animals laughed, and some just shook their heads. But the squirrel never gave up. She always found a reason to try again. "Maybe today it will work," she said every morning, because inventing always made her smile. Even if everything ended upside down, she kept dreaming of new ideas. One day, a strong wind blew through the forest, and the squirrel had a brand new idea. She tied colorful leaves to a dry branch and let them spin in the air. They spun fast, then slow, and made such a pleasant sound that no one walking by could ignore it. "What is that supposed to do?" asked the gorilla in a deep voice. "I don't know," the squirrel replied. "But look, Doesn't it make you feel good?" The wind kept blowing, and all the animals gathered around to see. The forest filled with laughter, but this time, they weren't laughing at her. They were laughing with joy. The squirrel realized her invention didn't fix anything, but it did something much better. It brought joy to the whole forest, and she understood that what mattered wasn't whether her ideas worked, but the happiness of imagining, creating, and sharing. Some of her inventions might help someone, and others might simply make others smile. And deep down, that was what she loved most about inventing. Each attempt made her just a little happier. And so today's adventure comes to an end. The forest hides many more wonderful stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. It was a quiet morning in the Forest of Wispia. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the forest slowly woke up around them. A young rabbit hopped happily toward his burrow until he suddenly stopped. Surprised, a large stone was blocking almost the whole entrance. He tried everything he could think of, pushing with his paws, jumping on top of it, even trying to move it with a stick. The stone didn't move an inch. At that moment, a moose appeared between the trees, tall and strong, but with a gentle look. "Do you need help?" he asked. Together, they pushed with all their strength, but even then, the stone stayed firmly in place. Then a crow came gliding down in circles. "I saw you from above," he said. "I think I can help you find the best direction to push." With the crow's guidance and a big shared effort, the stone rolled to the side, and the rabbit could finally see his burrow free again. Grateful, the rabbit decided to walk with the moose and the crow for a little while more. As they wandered, the crow told them that earlier that morning he had lost something very precious, a tiny shiny pebble that had fallen into the tall grass, where he just couldn't find it. The moose parted the grass with his antlers, and the rabbit, much smaller, slipped between the leaves and sniffed around until he found the hidden pebble. "Here it is," said the rabbit, happy to help his new friend. The crow flapped his wings with joy, deeply grateful. A little later, as they kept walking, the moose admitted quietly, "I wanted to taste the sweet berries from that big tree, but they're too high, even for me." The crow flew up to the branches and pointed out where the ripest berries were. The rabbit couldn't reach them either, but he suddenly had an idea. "Moose, could you help me climb?" he asked. The moose bent down slowly, and the rabbit climbed carefully up his antlers until he reached the branch, shaking it so the berries would fall to the ground. Under the soft light of sunset, the three of them stopped to rest. "Alone, each of us had problems," said the rabbit. "But together, we can do anything," added the crow. The moose nodded happily, feeling that the forest was a better place when they worked as one. And so, today's adventure came to an end. The forest hides many other exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new tale begins to shine in Wispia. It was a calm morning in the Forest of Wispia. Soft light filtered through the leaves, and the woods slowly began to wake. A young owl left his nest early. He had woken up hungry and decided to look for his favorite berries in the forest. As he flew happily, a sudden gust of wind pushed him to one side. The owl wobbled in surprise. He steadied himself, opened his wings wide, and adjusted his path, learning to glide with the changing wind. Wanting to move faster, He headed for his usual shortcut, a narrow passage between roots that he used every day. But when he arrived, he froze. A fallen log was blocking the path completely. He took a deep breath, looked around, and found a new trail, longer, but also more beautiful. He reached the berry tree he loved so much, but it was empty, not a single berry in sight. He searched through branches, moved leaves, looked from every angle, but still found nothing at all. Then he noticed a nearby bush with different fruits. He tried them and discovered he loved those too. With his belly full, he flew back toward his tree. He usually stopped to rest on the same branch halfway to his nest. But when he arrived, he saw a little bird asleep right on that spot. The owl blinked, confused. He tried a few other branches and found one even more comfortable, with a beautiful view of the forest. Settled on his new perch, the owl thought, "Today almost nothing went as planned, but I think I learned more than I expected." Things don't always turn out the way we hope, but adapting to change makes everything easier. And so, today's adventure came to an end. The forest hides many more exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new tale begins to shine in Wispia. The Wispia forest wakes up calm. Sun shines through the leaves, and the air smells like rain. In a small pond, a frog opens her eyes for the first time. She looks at her reflection and smiles. Everything is new and bright. Dragonflies fly over the pond, and the forest seems to welcome her. The other frogs jump happily among leaves and flowers. She tries, but barely moves. "Why can't I?" she murmurs sadly. She tries again. She jumps, falls, gets wet. Again and again. The dragonflies watch, curious about her effort. A blue dragonfly lands on a nearby leaf. "No one jumps well on the first try," it says kindly. "What matters is to keep trying." "But I've fallen so many times," sighs the frog. "Then you've learned a lot," answers the dragonfly. "Each fall teaches you something new." The frog smiles and nods. "Then I'll keep jumping." And she did, day after day, without giving up, even if she moved only a little. Days passed. Each morning she tried with more strength, until one day she felt she could do it. She jumped with all her might. The jump was big. She reached the center of the pond. Ripples sparkled on the water, and the frog felt happier than ever. She kept jumping, laughing, learning. Sometimes she fell, sometimes she landed well, but it no longer mattered. She had learned to enjoy the attempt. As evening fell, the frog looked at the sky. What mattered wasn't jumping far, she thought, but never giving up and keeping on trying. And that's how today's adventure ends. The forest hides many more exciting stories, waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story starts to shine in Wispia. One quiet morning in the Forest of Wispia, the sky began to fill with gray clouds. A small hedgehog looked up and shivered. A big storm was coming. Frightened, he ran to hide beneath the roots of an old tree. There, among the damp leaves, he found a snail who looked at him calmly and asked, "Why are you so scared?" The hedgehog hesitated for a moment, then confessed that he was afraid of the storm. The snail smiled and said that admitting fear was already an act of courage. He explained that he loved the rain because the forest smelled alive and the leaves sparkled. the hedgehog peeked out and saw the drops falling like pearls on the flowers. The snail encouraged him to step outside. At first he trembled, but then he took a step. He felt the cool water and the soft mud beneath his paws. His fear began to fade. The two played among the raindrops, laughing as the storm passed. And the hedgehog realized that the bravest thing he had done that day wasn't defeating fear, but recognizing it and daring to face it under the rain. And so the adventure came to an end. The Forest of Wispia began to shine again, filled with gentle sounds and fresh leaves after the rain. The forest hides many other exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. It was a bright morning in the Forest of Wispia. The air smelled of fresh leaves, and the songs of birds filled every corner. A magpie flew from branch to branch, grumbling. The sunlight painted the leaves in gold, yet nothing seemed good enough for her. "Always the same," she said, tossing a twig. "I spend all day fixing my nest, and it's never perfect. By tomorrow, it will probably be broken again." She looked up at the sky, frowning. "It's too sunny, and I'm sure it'll rain this afternoon. Who can live with such changing weather?" She pecked among the leaves, looking for food. "There isn't a single good seed in this whole forest," she complained. "The big ones are hard, and the small ones have no flavor." At the base of the tree, a little mouse watched her quietly, chewing a seed with calm curiosity. "Why do you complain so much, Magpie?" he asked with a smile. "The day is beautiful. There's sun, shade, and the forest smells wonderful." The little mouse shrugged and offered her a piece of his seed. When you stop complaining and look around, you realize how many things you already have to be grateful for. The magpie fell silent. For the first time that day, she lifted her eyes and looked around the forest. Everything moved slowly, filled with soft sounds and vivid colors. She looked at her nest and noticed how big and cozy it was. She thought about the weather, how the sun warmed her and the rain helped the forest grow. And if she looked closely, there was always food among the branches. The magpie took a deep breath and smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt calm, and the forest looked more beautiful than ever. And so, the adventure of the day came to an end. The forest hides many more exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Every night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. The night was calm, and the forest slept under a quiet sky. Tiny fireflies hid their light, waiting for the moon to shine again. But tonight, the moon looked sad, her glow faint, almost gone, like a dream that forgot to wake. From her tiny leaf, Leela opened her bright eyes, wings glowing softly. She whispered, "Oh moon, why have you stopped shining?" The trees stood still, listening. Even the wind held its breath. Lila took a deep breath and lifted into the night. Her golden trail painted warm sparkles through the dark trees, each flutter a promise that light would return. When she reached the lake, moonlight barely touched the water. Lila smiled gently. "Look," she said, "even without shining, you're still beautiful." The clouds shifted, showing the moon's pale face, quiet, uncertain. "Do you really think I'm still light?" the moon asked softly. "Yes, Lila said, her wings glowing brighter. Light never stops being light, even when hidden behind clouds. The moon blinked, then glowed, shy at first, then strong and silver. Silver light spilled across the forest. The fireflies woke and began to dance again, tiny stars of joy. Lila looked up, smiling. Sometimes, she whispered, all it takes is someone who believes in your light. And that night, under the gentle moon, the forest dreamed again, warm, bright, and full of hope. After the rain ended, the forest awoke, bright and full of tiny droplets. Among the roots of an old oak tree, Lila saw a small puddle trembling softly. "Hello, little puddle," she said gently. "Why are you so afraid?" "I." The puddle sighed, forming small ripples. "I'm afraid of the sun," it whispered. "When it rises, it will dry me up, and I'll disappear." Lila smiled tenderly. "Oh, little one," she whispered, "the sun won't hurt you. It will transform you. You'll rise to the sky, become a cloud, and when you return, you'll fall as rain, to hug the forest once again." The puddle stayed quiet, listening carefully. A small bubble rose to the surface like a tiny smile. "Will I really come back?" it asked shyly. "Of course you will," said Lila. "Sometimes the end of something is just the beginning of a new journey." Then the first ray of sunlight touched the water, and a golden mist began to rise. Lila watched as the mist floated upward, turning into a soft white cloud above the trees. The cloud drifted gently across the bright morning sky. "We'll see each other again when it rains," said Lila, smiling. A single drop fell from the cloud and shone as the air like a farewell. And so the forest dreamed once more. It still hides many other wonderful stories, waiting to be told. Each night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia. After the rain, the forest rested in silence. Raindrops sparkled on the leaves, and the air smelled of wet earth. Beneath the soil, a tiny seed slept quietly. It sighed softly. "When will I grow? I've been waiting for so long." From the darkness, a pink worm slowly crawled closer. "Hello, I'm Wiggy." The seed jumped in surprise. "Don't eat me." Wiggy chuckled kindly. "I don't eat seeds. I make tunnels so air and water can help you grow." "I've waited and waited, and nothing ever happens," said the seed sadly. Wiggy smiled. "Sometimes we grow without noticing." Days passed. The sun warmed the ground and gentle rains returned. Under the soil, the seed began to move. Something new was waking inside. "See? I told you," said Wiggy softly. "You just needed time." Sunlight touched the little seed as it lifted its first leaves toward the light. The young sprout grew a little more each day. The wind rocked it gently. The forest changed and the seasons passed. New leaves appeared and the sunlight warmed its crown. Years went by. The sprout grew tall and strong, and the forest around it bloomed with life. It became a great oak tree. Its wide branches shaded the clearing and protected the forest animals. And so today's adventure came to an end. The forest hides many more exciting stories waiting to be discovered. Each night, a new story begins to shine in Wispia.